post-French Revolution era, and it deals with such ideas as heroes and revolution, and how those things can be widespread or very personal based on our personal choices. And that is wax eager and excited. The lust of blood grows with its satisfaction. There is no satiety. The crowd had seen 100 noble heads fall beneath the guillotine today. It wanted to make sure that it would see another 100 fall on the morrow. Popo was sitting on an overturned and empty cask close by the gate of the barricade. A small detachment of citizen soldiers was under his command. The work had been very hot lately. Those cursed aristos were becoming terrified and tried their hardest to slip out of Paris. Men, women, and children, whose ancestors, even in remote ages, had served those traitors for bolts, were all traitors themselves, and raked food for the guillotine. Every day, Popo had the satisfaction of unmasking some fugitive royalists and sending them back to be tried by the Committee of Public Safety, presided over by that good patriot, citizen Fauquier Tinville. Robespierre and Danton both had commended Popo for his zeal, and Popo was proud of the fact that he, on his own initiative, had sent at least 50 aristos to the guillotine. But today, all the sergeants in command at the various barricades had had special orders. Recently, a very great number of aristos had succeeded in escaping out of France and in reaching England safely. There were curious rumors about these escapes. They had become very frequent and singularly daring. The people's minds were becoming strangely excited about it all. Sergeant Robespierre had been sent to the guillotine for allowing a whole family of aristos to slip out of the north gate under his very nose. It was asserted that these escapes were organized by a band of Englishmen whose daring seemed to be unparalleled, and who, from sheer desire to meddle in what did not concern them, spent their spare time in snatching away lawful victims destined for Madame the Guillotine. These rumors soon grew in extravagance. There was no doubt that this band of meddlesome Englishmen did exist. Moreover, they seemed to be under the leadership of a man whose pluck and audacity were almost fabulous. Strange stories were afloat of how he and those aristos whom he rescued became suddenly invisible as they reached the barricades and escaped out of the gates by sheer supernatural agency. No one had seen these mysterious Englishmen. As for their leader, he was never spoken of, save with a superstitious shudder. Citizen Fauquier Tinville would, in the course of the day, receive a scrap of paper from some mysterious source. Sometimes he would find it in the pocket of his coat. At others, it would be handed to him by someone in the crowd, whilst he was on his way to the sitting of the Committee of Public Safety. The paper always contained a brief notice that the band of meddlesome Englishmen were at work, and it was always signed with a device drawn in red, a little star-shaped flower, which we in England call the Scarlet We've all heard of this meddlesome Englishman, this accursed Pimpernel. He won't get through my gate, Blue, unless he be the devil himself. But Robespierre was a fool. The market carts were going through the gates. There was one laden with casks, and driven by an old man with a boy beside him. Robespierre was a bit drunk, but he thought himself very clever. He looked into the casks, most of them, at least, and saw that they were empty, and let the cart go through. A murmur of wrath and contempt went around the group of ill-clad wretches who crowded around Citizen Beau. Half an hour later, continued the sergeant, up comes the captain of the guard with a squad of some dozen soldiers with him. He has a cart gone through, he asks of Robespierre breathlessly. Yes, says Robespierre, not half an hour ago. And you let them escape, shouts the captain furiously. You go to the guillotine for this, citizen sergeant. That cart helped conceal the savant, Duke de Chilly, and all his family. What? Thunders Robespierre aghast. And the driver was none other than that accursed Englishman, the Scarlet Pimpernel. A howl of execration greeted this tale. Citizen Robespierre had paid for his blunder on the guillotine. But what a fool! Oh, what a fool! Beau was laughing so much at his own tale that it was some time before he could continue. After them, my men, shouts the captain, he said after a while. Remember the reward. After them, they could not have gone far. And with that, he rushes through the gate, followed by his dozen soldiers. But it was too late, shouted the crowd excitedly. They never got them. Curse that Robespierre for his folly. He deserved his fate. Fancy not examining those casks properly. But these sallies seemed to amuse Citizen Beau exceedingly. He laughed until his sides ached, and the tears streamed down his cheeks. Nay, nay, he said at last, those aristos were in the cart. The driver was not the Scarlet Pimpernel. What? No, the captain of the guard was that damned Englishman in disguise, and every one of his soldiers aristos. The crowd this time said nothing. The story certainly savored of the supernatural, and though the Republic had abolished God, it had not quite succeeded in killing the fear of the supernatural.